Today, we are digging into the incredible life of a German princess who married into the Russian imperial family. But her story doesn't end there. It takes a wild turn, and she eventually becomes a martyred saint. It's a journey that weaves through royalty, revolution, and some truly radical faith.
So you have to ask yourself, how does that happen? A German princess becomes a Russian saint and ends up buried in Jerusalem. It just sounds impossible, right? Her journey takes us through the grandest courts of Europe, right into the heart of the Russian Empire's chaotic fall, and all the way to the Holy Land. Let's unpack this incredible story.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Our story kicks off with Princess Elizabeth of Hesse. Now, she was the granddaughter of none other than Britain's Queen Victoria, and her family called her Ella. And while she grew up in this really gilded world of privilege, her childhood was also touched by real tragedy. She lost her mother and her little brother, and those early losses, they really shaped the person she would become.
And by all accounts, she was absolutely stunning. People at the time called her one of the most beautiful women in Europe. In fact, her own cousin, who would later become Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, was completely smitten with her. He said her beauty was just exquisite. So, as you can imagine, she had plenty of princes vying for her hand.
And this is where she makes a really fascinating choice. Look at this. She could have been the Empress of Germany. Prince Wilhelm was head over heels for her, but she turned him down. Instead, she chose a totally different path with Russia's Grand Duke Sergei. He was different. Pious, serious, a bit sad even. Their connection wasn't some fiery romance, it was something deeper. A bond built on faith and companionship. In a way, you can see she was already choosing a spiritual life over a political one, way back then.
To give you a sense of the world she was stepping into, when Sergei proposed, he brought an absolute treasure trove of jewels. He pinned so many on her that she actually joked she looked like a Christmas tree and could barely move. It's a cute human moment, right? It gives us this little glimpse of the woman behind the formal title, right before she gets swept up into the immense, solemn world of the Russian court.
So her move to Russia wasn't just a change of scenery. She became Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fiodorovna, and this started a profound internal journey, a transformation that was going to completely redefine her life.
This really charts her spiritual path. She gets to Russia in 1884. A few years later, she makes this life-changing trip to the Holy Land. And then, by 1891, she converts to Russian Orthodoxy. And get this, she didn't have to. It was totally her choice. Her Protestant family back in Germany was pretty scandalized. But for her, it was a deeply personal, spiritual step she felt she had to take.
And on that trip to Jerusalem, something incredible happened. There's this moment of pure, unbelievable foreshadowing. She was visiting the Church of Mary Magdalene, a church she had actually helped fund, and she felt such a powerful connection to the place that she said out loud she wanted to be buried there someday. Just a wish that somehow, against all odds, would eventually come true.
Now, her life in Moscow wasn't exactly a fairy tale. Her husband, Sergei, was a really controversial figure. As the governor general, he was known as a political hardliner. In fact, his time in charge kicked off with the brutal expulsion of Moscow's entire Jewish population, about 20,000 people. But amidst all that political turmoil, their personal life was also changing. They didn't have children of their own, but they became these really dedicated foster parents to their young niece and nephew.
But life in Russia at that time was so precarious. And in 1905, a single moment of political violence just shattered Elizabeth's world and set her on a final and truly remarkable path. It was sudden, and it was horrific. A revolutionary threw a bomb right into Sergei's carriage. He was killed instantly. And what happened next is just unbelievable. Elizabeth heard the blast, rushed out to the street, and with this shocking composure, she knelt down in the snow and started gathering the scattered remains of her husband.
This right here is the moment that truly defines her. Just days after her husband's murder, she did something absolutely unimaginable. She went to the prison to visit his killer. She didn't bring anger or hatred. She came with a plea for him to repent, telling him, "I myself have already forgiven you." She even said she would ask the Tsar to spare his life. He refused, but this act of radical forgiveness just echoed across all of Russia.
And that forgiveness wasn't just words. It was the spark for a complete reinvention of her life. She turned her back on the glittering imperial court. She sold everything she owned, all those magnificent jewels, even her own wedding ring. And with that money, she founded a new kind of religious community in Moscow, a convent dedicated to serving the poorest and sickest people in the city.
But her new life of service was on a collision course with one of the most violent upheavals of the 20th century, the Russian Revolution. Her royal blood made her a target, and her peaceful convent, well, it couldn't offer her any protection. In the spring of 1918, Lenin himself ordered the Cheka, that's the Bolshevik secret police, to arrest her. She was exiled deep into the Ural Mountains to a small town called Alapyevsk, along with a few other members of the Romanov family and her one loyal companion, a nun named Sister Barbara. Their fate was sealed on a dark night in July. The prisoners were all taken to an abandoned iron mine. They were brutally beaten and then hurled, one by one, into a 60-foot deep mine shaft, while they were still alive. To finish the job, their killers just tossed grenades down after them.
So what happened in those last moments? Well, this is where the story is a bit murky, caught between faith and forensics. Traditional accounts, the stories of the saints, say that local villagers heard the prisoners singing Orthodox hymns from the bottom of the pit after the explosions. But the original investigation from 1918 tells a different, grimmer story. Her body was found with her hands clenched shut, and a handkerchief was tied tightly over her head and face, maybe as a final, desperate attempt to shield herself.
And this is where her incredible story comes full circle. When the anti-Bolshevik White Army briefly took back the area, they recovered the bodies from the mine. As they were fleeing the advancing Red Army, they carried her coffin on this unbelievable year-long journey all the way across Siberia, through China, and finally, to the Holy Land.
Her legacy today is just immense. That wish she made all those years ago, it was fulfilled. She was laid to rest in the Church of Mary Magdalene. The Orthodox Church recognizes her as a holy new martyr. There's even a statue of her at Westminster Abbey in London, right alongside other 20th century martyrs. And in a final, ironic twist, the Russian state, the successor to the one that killed her, officially rehabilitated her name in 2009. So, it all leaves us with this one big question. Elizabeth rejected the path to being an empress, a position of huge earthly power. Instead, she chose a path of service that ended in martyrdom. Her life really forces you to think about what truly lasts. Is it the crowns and the palaces of this world? Or is it an act of forgiveness so profound that it still inspires people a whole century later?